This two-part series explores cat fences. In this first part, I'll share our journey that began in the summer of 2022, a little over 2 years ago. I've gone through several iterations of cat fences with varying degrees of success. We'll talk about materials and important considerations for installation. The second part will cover the benefits and challenges you'll probably want to think about before you get started. The instigator of this adventure, as with so many others, is Miley, the enthusiastic little kitty who is always looking for something to do, and who made it clear to me early on that going outside was very exciting for him. For a video about our catio, click on the card that appears on your screen now. So, in the summer of 2022, I decided to try to create a secure yard, a secure garden, from which my cats wouldn't be able to escape, using the wire mesh that I'd used for my catio. This was a fairly self-standing wire mesh, gauge 16 or 14 from memory. So by screwing it with 2 screws to my existing fence posts, which were 1.2 meters or 4 feet high, the fence was functional. And it worked initially. I had also roughly blocked the bottom of the fence where animals were already passing through. Leia, being a crafty little girl, found an uneven and poorly secured area at the bottom of the fence and managed to escape once, but otherwise we had a nice summer of 3 safe months. But it did not stop there. After watching the squirrels pass over the fence all summer, Miley realized that he could probably do the same. So in October, after multiple escapes, I tried to make the fence harder and harder to get over. Those slippery panels proved to be relatively functional, but very noisy in the wind, and Miley still figured out ways to beat them. He even jumped from a great height into the neighbor's yard.
Non, mais tu niaises-tu, man? C'est par là que t'es passé. C'est trop haut.
So here I'm basically saying this is where he jumped from. This is the height, and like, that's high. So in November, I admitted defeat, looked into cat fences, and finally installed a perfect fence. After over 2 years of use, I am very pleased with it and highly recommend it. Let's look at a few things to consider. First, the company was very helpful in planning everything out. They really wanted to work and will not recommend you installing it if it is unlikely to work. There should be nothing the cat could perch on within 1.8 meters or 6 feet horizontally from the fence. Because if the cat can perch that close, they could jump on the top of the fence and risk running away. I have a yard that is 4.9 meters or 16 feet wide. It's very narrow. It's divided into 2 areas, one near the house and the other one further away. The section near the house has a shrub and a tree that made it much harder to secure. Perfect Fence suggested that I divide the yard in 2 and create a tunnel between the house and the section farther away from my house, which is the larger and easier to secure of the 2. It was a great idea, and I constructed the tunnel with the wire mesh that I salvaged from my fence that was no longer working. I used fence planks connected together and placed on concrete pavers so that the tunnel was raised off the ground enough to reduce the risk of rot. In 2 years, I have not had to adjust anything. If it had been an elevated tunnel, I would have made it much sturdier. I created a gate between the 2 sections of the yard, with the tunnel connecting next to it. In this second section, I have a shed and 3 trees. Miley has never climbed the shed, but the cat that had gotten in the first year, before I made adjustments, was able to climb out using it. So beware, Perfect Fence warned me that this could be a problem. It's going to depend on your particular cat. The hackberry tree is glued to the fence, so it wasn't a problem. I just cut a few branches that were too low. The pear tree is more problematic. I added crazy carpets to make the trunk smooth and slippery, preventing cats from climbing it. I also attached the netting in the tree using excess material, making escape practically impossible from there. And my neighbor's shed is right on the other side of the fence in this area, so it's a nice perch, but cats don't come in through there because the netting is really high in the tree. The spruce was not a problem because cats do not tend to climb it because of the thorns, so even if it is poorly located, it's not a problem. I built a play structure like in a children's park, making sure to locate it 1.8 meters or 6 feet away from the fences and the shed as much as possible. The sonotube was not a good idea for a tunnel. It got destroyed the second there was rain, but the 30 centimeters or 12-inch PVC pipes that I found at work were more durable as tunnels. The perfect fence posts are easy to install, but I was too lazy to use a rope with a level, so the installation is much less pretty than the ones you'll see on their website. I chose the option with the posts that raise the existing fence, but they also have kits with just the arms without the upright posts if your fence is already high enough. The arms have springs and they bend if a cat tries to climb up. I installed everything just before winter, much to Miley's delight. The mesh is a net. It's not a self-standing fence, so it's light to install and you attach it to the arms with zip ties. During the winter, the net and arms can bend when there's heavy snow or freezing rain that accumulates, so you have to do a little snow removal to keep it from getting worse, but just shaking the net a little bit is fine, you're good to go. I had to reinstall 2 or 3 zip ties the first winter because the netting broke in a big snowstorm, but since then that's been it. The following spring I made a small cat patio because kitties like to hang out in the dry. My neighbors replaced their fence during their huge renovation and moved it around a bit, so there is a small fence area that I closed with some leftover wire mesh. Miley likes to look down the alley there, even though it is right next to the litter box. The taller posts are now useless on that side of the garden, of course, just the arms would have been fine on that side. I made a roof over the litter box to keep it from getting too wet when it rains, because that makes picking up the poop harder than if the sand is dry. Since the netting is black, it's not very visible, but it is still intriguing for passers-by, who will ask you, "What kind of animals do you have?" I was worried about whether or not the birds would be able to see the netting well and if they would get caught in it. 2 summers later, I've seen absolutely no problems. There's never been a bird in the fence. An important thing is to also secure the bottom of your fence. I used leftover wire mesh to do this and put a little earth over it so it's a little into the ground. In the section closest to the house, since I had some leftover net, I simply installed it by tying it at the ends and to the shrub. This is enough for me to leave that portion of the yard accessible to cats when I can supervise them. They have never escaped. This made me suggest that if you do not want to pay for a cat fence with folding arms, you could potentially come up with something functional by using flexible netting that you attach to your fence, your house, your trees, whatever you have. A flexible net is much harder to climb for a cat, actually, and to get over to than a rigid mesh, because it's not stable. In a rigid mesh, they can climb all the way to the top and then pass over it. A flexible net, it's really hard to do that. So that could be enough, depending on your cat. The flexible net used by Perfect Fence is from Tenax. At your gate, you simply overlap the net at the gate, and of course, you will need 1 arm on the gate and 1 arm on the post right next to it. In the following video, we'll explore the benefits and challenges of fencing for cats.